Sign number 1, superficial charm. The most dangerous person in the room is rarely the one who makes you uncomfortable. It's the one who makes you feel like the most important person in the world the moment you meet them. Psychopaths are often the most magnetic individuals you'll ever encounter. Quick-witted, smooth-talking, disarming. They know exactly what to say, when to say it, and how to make you feel seen in a way that almost feels too good to be real. That's because it is. Researchers from Cornell University found that psychopaths talk more, use more emotional words, and are exceptionally skilled at presenting exactly the persona their target needs to see. A shy person gets the sensitive, humble version. A confident person gets the bold, exciting version. The mask changes. The calculation behind it never does. Watch what happens when the charm stops working, when you stop being impressed, when you push back. The warmth will vanish, and something colder will take its place. Approximately 1% of the general population meets the clinical threshold for psychopathy. Research finds higher than average concentrations among CEOs, surgeons, and top lawyers, not prison cells. The psychopath most likely to affect your life isn't behind bars. They're charming, successful, and you wouldn't suspect a thing. The charm is the first thing you see. What comes next is what they do with it. Sign number 2. Pathological lying. They will lie when the truth would serve them better. That's what separates pathological lying from ordinary dishonesty. Most people lie occasionally to avoid consequences or protect feelings. Psychopaths lie as a default mode of operation, reflexively, effortlessly, and without the internal discomfort that makes lying difficult for everyone else. Words for them are tools, not reflections of reality. A Cornell University study found that psychopaths describe their own crimes using past tense language, cause and effect framing, and references to basic physical needs like food and money, rather than relationships or emotions. They narrate their own wrongdoing the way someone would describe a transaction: detached, clinical, remarkably unbothered. If you confront them with evidence, they won't admit the lie. They'll build a better one. They'll question your memory. They'll reframe what happened. They'll express disappointment that you doubted them. Pay close attention to how someone responds when caught in a contradiction. Most people feel embarrassed. A psychopath feels inconvenienced and immediately begins working on the next version of the story. Sign number 3. Grandiose sense of self-worth. They don't just think highly of themselves. They genuinely believe they are exceptional, and that the rules everyone else follows simply don't apply to them. This isn't regular confidence. Regular confidence is earned, contextual, and coexists with the ability to recognize failure. Grandiosity in psychopathy is fixed and completely disconnected from actual performance. They expect admiration as a baseline, not as a result. And when they don't receive it, the response is contempt, not humility. This sense of superiority is what fuels the exploitation of others. If you genuinely believe you are exceptional and others are instruments to be used, then using them isn't a moral failure. It's just efficiency. Watch for people who consistently center themselves in every story, who can't tolerate being corrected, even gently, who react to ordinary criticism with disproportionate anger or cold withdrawal. Grandiosity rarely announces itself. It reveals itself in the slow accumulation of moments where the world is always required to revolve around them. Sign number 4. Lack of empathy. In 2013, neuroscientist John DeCidi at the University of Chicago conducted one of the most revealing brain studies on psychopathy ever performed. His team scanned 121 incarcerated men using fMRI and asked them to imagine painful scenarios, first happening to themselves, then to someone else. When they imagined their own pain, brain response was normal, strong even. When they imagined someone else's pain, the empathy circuits went completely dark. The disturbing detail, in the most psychopathic participants, the brain's reward center actually lit up when imagining others in pain. For some, another person's suffering doesn't register as distress. It registers closer to pleasure. This isn't a choice. It's a neurological reality, and it explains everything else. The lying without guilt, the exploitation without remorse, the charm without any real connection underneath. What you'll notice in daily life isn't dramatic cruelty at first. It's the inability to comfort you without making it about themselves. The blank, impatient look when you express pain. The sense that your emotions are an inconvenience they're managing, not something they actually feel. Sign number 5. Manipulative behavior. Everything they do is in service of a goal, and you are a means to that goal. Psychopaths are master manipulators. Not because they're exceptionally intelligent, but because they're completely unburdened by the discomfort that makes manipulation difficult for most people. They don't feel guilty using someone. They don't feel embarrassed when a tactic is exposed. They simply adjust and try a different approach. The tactics vary by target. With emotional people, they use performed vulnerability and fabricated need. With logical people, they use carefully constructed arguments. With insecure people, they alternate extreme validation with sudden withdrawal, a cycle designed to create dependency. The pattern that unifies all of these is asymmetry. You give, they take. And the structure is designed so that the giving feels like your choice, even when it was orchestrated from the beginning. The clearest warning sign is the persistent feeling that you're always somehow in debt to someone. That no matter how much you give, it's never quite enough. That feeling isn't a relationship dynamic. It's a control structure. If this video is making you think of someone specific right now, that recognition matters. Share this before you keep watching. Someone in your life may need to see these signs before it's too late. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. The signs that come next are the ones most people don't recognize until serious damage has already been done. Sign number 6. No remorse or guilt. They will hurt you. And then they will explain, very calmly, why it wasn't their fault. The absence of remorse is one of the defining features in every clinical framework used to assess psychopathy. From the Hare Psychopathy Checklist revised to the DSM criteria for antisocial personality disorder. It isn't that psychopaths feel remorse and suppress it. The capacity for genuine remorse simply isn't there. What you see instead is a performance of accountability carefully designed to end the conversation. An apology that never actually acknowledges what they did. An explanation that subtly repositions them as the real victim. A moment of apparent contrition that disappears completely once consequences are no longer immediate. The clinical term is shallow affect. Emotional responses that look right on the surface but have no depth beneath them. They can say the words. They can produce the expression. What they cannot do is mean it. When someone hurts you repeatedly and their apologies never change their behavior, not because they can't change, but because they lack the internal pressure that makes change necessary, you're not dealing with carelessness. Remorse is the correction mechanism most people carry. Without it, the same behavior repeats without limit. Sign number 7. Parasitic lifestyle. They are extraordinarily skilled at getting other people to carry the weight of their lives. A parasitic lifestyle, identified explicitly in the Hare Psychopathy Checklist as a core feature, means relying on others for financial support and resources while contributing nothing in return. It rarely looks like obvious exploitation. More often it looks like charm combined with a series of circumstances that always seem to require your help. First, it's a temporary situation, then a series of them, then a slow realization that the situation has become permanent, and that the entire time, all the giving has flowed in one direction. Psychopaths move through relationships this way. One person is useful until they run out of what's needed: money, connections, emotional labor, at which point that relationship is discarded and the next one begins. The question is never, who do I care about? It's, what does this person have that I want? If you felt like someone was always in crisis, always needing something, but mysteriously unavailable the moment you needed support, you felt the asymmetry. The crises are often real, but they're not unfortunate. They're functional. Sign number 8. Impulsivity and reckless behavior. Here is where the image of the cold, calculated psychopath becomes more complicated. Psychopaths are impulsive. Not all the time. They can plan when something matters to them, but because they don't experience the anticipatory anxiety that functions as a natural brake on risky behavior, they act before thinking, repeatedly, and without learning from results. Reckless financial decisions with obvious downsides pursued anyway. Relationships exploded over minor provocations. Jobs abandoned without notice. A general pattern of burning things down that people around them spend years trying to explain. This impulsivity also explains the parasitic history. They're not building toward anything sustainable, because sustainability requires caring about the future. And caring about the future requires emotional investment in outcomes. Without that investment, only the present exists. If someone consistently makes decisions that seem self-destructive, and this pattern repeats regardless of consequences, that absence of learning isn't stubbornness. It reflects something deeper. Sign number 9. Shallow emotions and the emotional mask. Psychopaths feel emotions, but not the way you do. They experience something closer to a narrow band of sensation: excitement, frustration, boredom, desire. What they don't experience, or experience only faintly, is the deeper emotional texture most people take for granted. Love, grief, guilt, genuine warmth. These aren't things they feel. They're signals they've learned to recognize and reproduce. Because reproduction is what keeps the mask functional. Research has found that psychopaths study emotional responses. They observe how people react in certain situations and learn to mimic those reactions with enough accuracy to pass, until close observation reveals the inconsistencies. The smile that doesn't reach the eyes. The empathetic response that's slightly delayed, like it had to be retrieved rather than felt. The words, "I love you," delivered with the same emotional weight as a grocery order. What makes this recognizable over time is the disconnect between words and pattern. What someone says in a single conversation can be convincingly warm. What their behavior reveals across months cannot be consistently faked. Trust the pattern, not the performance. Sign number 10. Inability to sustain real relationships. Look at the history, not the story, the actual history. Psychopaths consistently leave a trail, not always of dramatic events, but of people who were close to them and then weren't. Relationships that ended badly and suddenly. Friends who were intimate, and then, for reasons that never quite made sense, became strangers or enemies. Romantic partners who described the beginning as extraordinary and the ending as devastating. The Hare Psychopathy Checklist explicitly identifies the inability to sustain long-term relationships as a core feature. Not because psychopaths can't be engaging short-term, but because real relationships require reciprocity over time. They require showing up when it costs something. They require genuine emotional investment across months and years. Psychopaths can simulate all of this for a period, but once someone is no longer useful, once they've given what they had, or begun to see through the performance, the relationship ends quickly, and without the grief that endings normally carry. Ask yourself, how many long-term, close, genuinely mutual relationships does this person have? Not admirers, not acquaintances, people who know them deeply, over time, and still choose to stay. That answer will tell you more than any single conversation ever could. Closing 10 signs, 10 patterns that psychopaths consistently display, not as isolated incidents, but as a coherent way of moving through the world. Recognizing these signs doesn't mean diagnosing everyone who makes you uncomfortable. True psychopathy affects roughly 1% of the population, but the damage it causes doesn't require a clinical diagnosis to be real. What these signs give you is a framework, a way of trusting what you've been observing but couldn't name. Because the most common experience people report after recognizing a psychopath in their life isn't shock, it's relief. The relief of finally understanding why something never felt right. If any of these patterns describes someone in your life, protect yourself, set boundaries, limit access. Seek support from people outside the situation who can see it clearly. You will not change them, but you can change how much access they have to you. Tell us in the comments. Which of these signs did you recognize first? Or wish you had recognized sooner? We read every response,